All right, we're diving into some pretty deep waters today.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
You guys sent us Dissecting Woke by Conrad Riker.
Oh, yeah, this book. It's a fascinating one.
And it seems like you're really looking for some answers about how culture is shifting and how it's affecting your world.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about this book is, like, Riker doesn't just describe those shifts.
Right.
He actually equips you to kind of decode them.
Interesting.
He argues that terms we hear all the time, like social justice, equity, diversity,
Right.
these have been redefined, and they're now being used almost like code words to push a very specific agenda.
Ooh, okay, code words.
Yeah.
That's a strong term.
It is.
Like, it's making me think twice about every time I hear those phrases now.
Right.
But what makes Riker think they're not being used genuinely?
Well, he goes deep, right?
Yeah.
He goes into the history of ideas like critical theory, the Frankfurt School.
Right.
He connects them to the modern woke movement.
I see.
And, you, as someone already familiar with these concepts, I think you'll find Riker's analysis particularly insightful.
Okay, yeah.
Because he argues that these schools of thought, they intentionally set out to redefine language as, like, a tool for social change.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing how this gets tricky fast.
It does.
So if these terms are being used as, like, code, what's the real message? What's the agenda here?
That's where Riker gets into what he calls the woke lexicon. And he highlights terms like, microaggressions, white privilege, even misgendering.
Yeah.
And he argues that these terms are used not just to describe situations, but to shut down debate.
Okay.
And to position certain groups as perpetual victims.
He gives a really powerful example of how microaggressions, which were originally intended to describe those, subtle forms of bias, are now used to create a climate where any disagreement can be labeled as offensive.
Exactly.
Even if it's just a difference of opinion.
It's like walking on eggshells.
Totally.
Right.
Yep.
And Riker argues that this creates a situation where, open dialogue becomes almost impossible, and certain viewpoints are just automatically deemed unacceptable.
So what happens when you can't have open dialogue?
Yeah.
Like, how does that impact institutions like marriage, for example, which rely on communication and negotiation?
Well, that's where Riker brings in the Hegelian dialectic.
Okay.
But with a twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He argues that instead of genuine debate leading to a better outcome, this dialectic is actually being manipulated.
I see.
So the thesis, let's say, of traditional marriage is being challenged by the antithesis of, like, radical individualism or something, leading to a synthesis,
Right.
that while seemingly about equality actually weakens the institution as a whole.
Okay, hold on. I need to wrap my head around this for a sec. So he's saying that even compromises, which, like, on the surface seem like good things, can actually be used to further erode, like, the very foundation of marriage.
That's the argument. Yep.
That's pretty unsettling.
It's about recognizing the long game, right?
Yeah.
And Riker argues that, cultural Marxists, that's a term he uses to describe the folks pushing this agenda.
Okay.
They're playing chess, not checkers.
I like that.
Every move is calculated to advance their goals, even if it doesn't seem radical at first.
So if marriage is one target, what are some others? Where else is this, like, this woke lexicon being used to reshape our world?
Riker argues it's happening everywhere.
Everywhere.
He devotes a whole chapter to what he calls the war on masculinity. And he argues that traditional male traits are being demonized as, like, toxic.
Okay.
And that men are being systematically undermined in areas like education, the legal system, even pop culture.
Wait, toxic masculinity?
Yeah.
Isn't that phrase meant to address, like, actual toxic things like violence and aggression?
Right.
Is he saying that all masculinity is bad?
That's where Riker gets really controversial.
Okay.
He argues that the concept of toxic masculinity has been weaponized to pathologize all masculinity, even positive traits like strength, protectiveness, leadership.
Wow.
He claims it's part of a larger effort to dismantle those traditional gender roles and reshape society in a way that...
Okay, I think we need to unpack this war on masculinity idea a bit more.
Yeah.
Because it's hitting a nerve.
Yeah, get it.
So... you've read Riker's book. What evidence does he provide to back up this claim?
Yeah.
Is it all just theory, or are there real-world examples?
He's all about real-world examples.
Okay.
Like, he looks at how men are portrayed in movies, TV shows.
Okay.
And he argues they're often depicted as, bumbling fools or violent brutes.
Right. I've seen that.
He analyzes school curriculums, even legal precedents,
Wow.
to show how, in his view, men are systematically disadvantaged.
This is reminding me of something I've seen discussed a lot in, like, the red pill community.
Yeah.
This idea of a covert contract.
Yes.
Where men are expected to be providers and protectors,
Right.
but are then punished or vilified for embodying those very traits.
That's a fascinating connection.
Yeah.
It ties directly into Riker's analysis of the feminist power wheel.
Oh, okay.
Which, he claims was originally intended to address domestic violence.
But has now been twisted into a tool for it. I'm really curious to hear his take on this.
Yeah. So he argues it's now being used to frame men as inherently dominant and abusive regardless of their actual behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And he says it creates this narrative where women are always positioned as victims.
Okay.
Even in situations where, they might be the aggressors.
It's like he's saying men are guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
And for guys listening who, maybe are going through a divorce or custody battles, that might not sound so far-fetched to them.
Not at all. And Riker, he provides tons of real-world examples.
Okay.
From legal cases, social trends to support this argument.
Right.
He even connects it to the rise of, the manosphere.
Yeah.
That online community of men who are pushing back against what they see as, feminist overreach.
Yeah, it's a huge community online.
It is.
I can see why this book is really resonating with you.
Yeah.
It's kind of validating those feelings of, frustration and injustice that a lot of men in the red pill community are experiencing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And Riker goes even deeper.
Okay.
He connects this war on masculinity to the institutions that are meant to educate and shape young minds. Mm-hmm. He argues that schools are no longer these bastions of neutral knowledge, but that they're actively pushing a very specific ideology.
Okay, that's a bold claim.
It is.
Does he give any specific examples of how that's happening?
Oh, yeah. He dives into curriculum changes, especially in subjects like history, literature.
Right.
He argues that instead of presenting a balanced view of events, there's a focus on narratives that emphasize, victimhood, oppression, often portraying men as the villains and women as the victims.
So he's saying it's not just about teaching facts anymore.
No.
It's about pushing a specific worldview.
Yeah, and he ties this back to the redefinition of language we talked about earlier. Words like oppression, privilege, they're being used to frame historical events in a way that supports this woke agenda.
This is making me think about my own kids. What are they being taught?
Yeah.
Are they getting a balanced view, or are they being, indoctrinated into this ideology? Mm-hmm. It's pretty unsettling to think about.
It is. Riker's whole point is to make you aware.
Yeah.
To question the narratives.
Right.
Not just in school, but everywhere.
Yeah.
He even goes so far as to say that this focus on identity politics, which is so prevalent in education now, that it actually undermines our shared humanity.
Because instead of seeing each other as individuals, we're constantly being divided into these groups.
Yep.
Based on, race, gender,
exactly,
all these other identity markers.
And Riker argues that this division, it's intentional.
Really?
It creates this climate of conflict and resentment that can then be exploited to push for, radical social change.
It's like that classic divide and conquer.
Exactly.
Yeah. But how does this tie back to the, the red pill philosophy?
Right.
And this idea of covert contracts?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
If men are constantly being told they're, privileged oppressors, and women are being told they're perpetual victims, it creates this dynamic where men are expected to constantly apologize, make amends, while women are encouraged to assert their victimhood. That sounds a lot like a covert contract.
Wow. Yeah, I see the connection now. It's like this societal narrative is actually reinforcing those unhealthy power dynamics.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Riker doesn't just point out the problems.
Oh.
He offers solutions too, right?
He does.
What does he suggest we do about all this?
Well, one of his big takeaways is the importance of reclaiming language. He says we need to push back against the redefinition of terms like social justice, and equity.
Right.
And reclaim their original meanings.
So it's not about abandoning those concepts altogether.
No.
It's about using them accurately and honestly.
Exactly. And he also stresses the importance of building alternative institutions that are, free from the grip of this woke ideology.
So like homeschooling, for example.
Exactly. He sees homeschooling, charter schools, online learning platforms as ways to provide like a more balanced, objective education that doesn't push a specific political agenda.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
If you're concerned about what your kids are being taught in school, you can take control and make sure they're getting a more well-rounded perspective.
Absolutely. And it's not just about education. He also encourages the development of alternative media outlets, that can provide a platform for dissenting viewpoints.
Like podcasts, perhaps.
Yes. He sees independent media as like a crucial counterweight to the mainstream media. Which he argues is largely controlled by the woke left.
So for those listening who are feeling like overwhelmed or even, gaslighted by the dominant cultural narrative, Riker's message is to find those alternative sources of information, to connect with like-minded people, and to build a community where you can speak freely and openly without fear of judgment or censorship.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of individual action. He argues that even though the forces of woke culture might seem really overwhelming, each of us has the power to make a difference.
How?
By speaking out, challenging the narrative, refusing to be silenced.
So it's a message of empowerment then, really.
It is.
He's saying we don't have to just sit back and accept what's happening.
Nope.
We can fight back.
Absolutely.
We can make our voices heard.
Yep.
And create a better future.
For ourselves and our families.
For ourselves and our families, yeah. But there's a lot to unpack here.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you listening have questions.
Absolutely.
And one of the areas where those questions might come up is the concept of violence itself. Riker argues that this term has been dangerously expanded.
It has.
Violence.
Yeah.
That's something I've definitely seen debated, especially online, like in the red pill community.
Yeah.
So what's Riker's take on how that word is being used?
Well, he argues that violence isn't just about physical harm anymore. He says it's been expanded to include, words, ideas, even unintentional slights. He calls it the weaponization of victimhood.
Okay, so like those microaggressions we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
How does that become violence?
He gives the example of hate speech. He says that definition is so broad that almost any criticism of, certain groups can be labeled as hateful and therefore violent.
So it's a way to just shut down debate.
Yes.
Silence dissent.
Exactly.
So you're saying that words can be used as weapons.
That's his argument.
I mean, I get that words can hurt, but are we really talking about actual violence here?
That's Riker's point.
Okay.
He says this redefinition of violence is dangerous.
Okay.
Because it equates speech with, physical harm.
Right.
And it creates a culture of fear.
Yeah.
Where people are afraid to express their opinions.
And that's where that whole red pill idea of walking on eggshells comes in again, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you can't even have a normal conversation anymore without worrying that you're going to offend somebody or be accused of violence.
And Riker argues this is all part of a larger strategy to control the narrative and silence any viewpoints that challenge the, the woke orthodoxy.
It's like they're trying to control our thoughts.
Right. It's getting into that territory.
Yeah.
And he ties this control of language to the rise of like big tech censorship.
Right.
He argues that social media platforms are like the new public square.
Right.
And they're being used to silence dissenting voices.
So it's not just about what we say, like face-to-face.
No.
It's also about what we're posting online.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of examples, right?
Oh, yeah. Numerous examples of people being shadow banned, deplatformed, even having their accounts deleted. Wow.
For expressing views that, go against the grain.
It's like the digital equivalent of being, ostracized from the tribe.
Right.
And for guys in the red pill community who are already feeling marginalized, that can be a very isolating experience.
Absolutely. And his warning about big tech censorship, it's especially relevant for anyone who are, seeking alternative perspectives.
Right.
Trying to break free from that mainstream narrative.
Right.
He argues these platforms have become echo chambers.
Yeah.
Where only certain viewpoints are allowed.
Yeah, it's like being trapped in a bubble where you're only exposed to information that confirms what you already believe.
Exactly.
And if you try to challenge those beliefs, you get shut down.
You're out.
Which is why he emphasizes finding those alternative sources of information, right?
Yeah.
Independent media outlets, online communities that really value free speech.
It's about diversifying your information diet,
Yeah.
Yet don't just rely on the mainstream media or, social media to tell you what's true.
Right. Yeah.
You got to do your own research, seek out different perspectives, and think critically about everything you're reading.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to question the narratives.
Right.
Even if they're coming from sources that you've, traditionally trusted.
Right.
He argues this woke ideology has infiltrated so many institutions, including the media, academia, even the government.
So what's the antidote to all this?
Yeah.
What can we do to push back against this cultural shift? Reclaim our language or institutions.
He offers a number of strategies.
Okay.
And they really all come down to one thing. Courage.
Courage, okay.
He argues that we need to be courageous enough to speak our minds, to challenge that prevailing orthodoxy, and to build those alternative structures that, align with our values.
So it's not just about complaining about the problem.
No.
It's about taking action.
Taking action. He's a big believer in the power of individual action.
Okay.
And he argues that even though, these forces might seem really overwhelming, each of us has the power to make a difference.
By educating ourselves, understanding the tactics, and then using that knowledge to push back.
Exactly. He also stresses the importance of building community.
Okay.
Connecting with like-minded people who share your values and can offer support and encouragement.
There's strength in numbers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're feeling isolated or marginalized, finding that community, it can give you the strength to resist the pressure, to conform, to speak your truth.
It's huge. And ultimately, his message is one of hope.
Okay.
He argues that the woke ideology is ultimately a fragile one, built on, lies and contradictions.
Right.
And he believes that if enough people, wake up to the truth and have the courage to resist, we can turn the tide.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And one that I think really resonates with the red pill community.
I think so, too.
It's about taking that red pill, seeing the world for what it is, and then taking action to create a better future.
That's it.
And for those of you listening who are already on that journey, Riker's book offers some really valuable insights, practical strategies.
It does.
That can help you navigate those challenges ahead.
For sure.
I think what's so compelling about his work is that he doesn't just diagnose the problem.
Right.
He offers a path forward.
He does.
He gives you tools, strategies that individuals can use to reclaim their agency and fight back against this cultural tide.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're not powerless.
Right.
We have a choice.
Yeah.
You can conform and, be swept along.
Right.
Or you can resist and fight for something better.
And that choice, it begins with awareness. So by understanding the tactics being used, recognizing how language is being manipulated, and connecting with others who share our values, we can start to reclaim our power and build a world that is, more just, more equitable, more free.
That's the power of a deep dive like this.
It is.
It gives you the knowledge and the insight you need to see the world in a new way.
Right.
And to make those informed choices about how you want to live your life.
So for those of you listening, keep questioning.
Keep exploring.
And most importantly, keep thinking for yourselves.
That's it.
The future isn't set in stone.
No.
We have the power to shape it.